I booked the Blue Shingle House on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, United States, after weeks of scrolling through listings that all promised ocean views and charm. This one caught my eye because of its wraparound deck, the white Adirondack chairs lined up like soldiers, and the promise of 6 bedrooms with sea-facing windows. The rental alone cost $18,640 for the week, plus $1,380 for groceries, for $1,200 for 2 private boat tours, $950 for chef's dinner, and $600 for bikes and rentals. I paid for everything up front with my own card. My brother Mark said he'd square it up when we got there. My sister Kara promised she'd Venmo me by Monday. Neither did. We arrived on a bright Saturday afternoon, when the air smelled like salt and sunscreen. The driveway crunched under the tires as I parked the white SUV I'd rented for $1,120. My mother, Linda, stepped out first, her sunglasses enormous and her voice already commanding. She took a deep breath, then turned to my cousin Ethan, who was recording on his phone. "Isn't this perfect?" she said, spinning like she had personally chosen every detail. Inside, the foyer opened to tall windows that framed the glittering water. The house smelled of pine wood and fresh paint. I wanted to savor that moment, the calm before everyone scattered like confetti. Jenna, my sister-in-law, immediately staked claim on the primary bedroom with a king bed, walk-in closet, and marble bathroom. "This feels right," she said, placing her lipstick on the vanity like it was an act of ownership.
She didn't even ask.
I had reserved that room for myself, but I let it go. Instead, I took the attic bedroom with 2 twin beds and a slanted ceiling, the one that faced the driveway instead of the water. I told myself it didn't matter. I'd come to make memories, not arguments. I unpacked methodically, folding towels, aligning snacks in the kitchen, labeling the fridge shelves, and setting the dinner table. Each name went on a small folded card. Mom, Mark, Kara, Ethan, Jenna. I wrote mine last, tucking it slightly to the side. As I worked, I could hear laughter from the deck. Ethan filming again, Mark calling out that the trip of the year was officially starting. They sounded like a family in harmony. For a brief second, I almost believed we were. When the private chef arrived that evening, the kitchen buzzed with excitement. He cooked buttered lobster tails, sweet corn, and garlic mashed potatoes. The table was glowing with candles and chatter. When dessert came, Mark lifted his glass and said, "A toast to Jenna for organizing this amazing trip." Everyone clapped. Jenna smiled modestly. My fork paused midair. The compliment hung in the air like smoke. I smiled and took a sip of water, letting the moment pass. Gratitude wasn't required, I told myself. I had receipts, not applause. After dinner, I stood on the deck overlooking the dark ocean. The moonlight shimmered across the water, silver and unbothered. I tucked my credit card back into my wallet and whispered to myself, "You did this for them. That's enough." But somewhere deep inside, the words felt untrue. The next morning began with noise, coffee grinders, laughter, plans. I woke early, walked to the beach, and watched seagulls trace slow arcs above the waves. The house behind me was beautiful in the morning light, but it already felt like it belonged to someone else. When I returned, breakfast was half-eaten, and the group was debating who should drive to the lighthouse tour. "You have the SUV, right?" Kara said casually, not meeting my eyes. "We'll all squeeze in." We drove with the windows down, music blaring. I paid for parking and bought tickets while they posed for photos. Ethan filmed again, narrating as if for a travel vlog. "Family time at Cape Cod," he said cheerfully. I stood a few feet away, waiting for him to say my name. He didn't. At lunch, I sat at the far end of the table while they shared inside jokes that seemed suddenly years old. "You're so quiet," Jenna said, smirking. "You should relax. You're on vacation." Her tone wasn't kind. I smiled back, small and polite. "Just enjoying the view," I said. But the truth was, I was watching patterns. How easily they slipped me out of the story, how naturally they played the parts they'd written for themselves. That evening, I started saving proof. Payment emails, bank statements, and text messages confirming my reservations, all tucked neatly into a folder on my phone labeled taxes. I even recorded a few moments, Mark laughing about free trips, Jenna telling Linda that some people just like to pay for attention. I didn't know what I'd do with the recordings, only that they steadied me. Proof, I've learned, is a quiet weapon. At sunset, I sat alone on the deck, while the others took group photos near the water. I could hear Ethan's camera shutter clicking. "Okay, one more, everyone in," he called. When I joined them, Kara said, "Oh, wait, we're doing the siblings one." I froze for a second, then nodded and stepped aside. The laughter behind me felt like static. Later, inside the kitchen, Linda told the chef, "This trip was my daughter-in-law's idea. She's the planner." The chef smiled politely. "You're lucky," he said. "Someone really went all out." Linda's smile deepened. "Yes," she said. "She always does." Her gaze flicked briefly toward Jenna. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. I kept arranging leftover desserts on a plate, pretending not to hear. That night, as I lay in the attic room listening to the distant waves, I made a quiet decision. I wouldn't confront them. Not yet. I wanted to see how far the story would go without me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting the truth. It's letting them speak long enough to reveal their lies. I closed my eyes and listened to the creak of the old wood, the muffled laughter drifting up from downstairs. I imagined the sea erasing footprints on the sand, one by one. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'd stop pretending to belong. But tonight, I would rest. Because the storm I was planning didn't need thunder. It only needed time. By Sunday morning, the rhythm of exclusion had taken shape. It started in whispers, then spread like a quiet contagion. The family photo on the deck was snapped while I was still in the kitchen arranging fruit. The bike ride began, before I even finished setting out the sunscreen. When the chef left a handwritten note thanking the hostess, Linda handed it straight to Jenna, who slipped it into her purse like a trophy. No one corrected the mistake. No one even looked at me. At the lighthouse that afternoon, I stood beside the railing, the wind tangling my hair as Linda chatted with a friendly couple from Ohio. "My daughter-in-law organized everything," she said, resting a proud hand on Jenna's shoulder. "Saved us a fortune." The couple nodded approvingly. I smiled faintly and looked out toward the horizon where the water met the sky. The white foam line along the shore reminded me of something I hadn't been brave enough to draw, a boundary. On the boat tour to see seals, I sat near the stern while Ethan filmed everyone laughing, clinking drinks, and pretending this trip was perfect. When I waved at the camera, he lowered it. "We need a clean aesthetic," he said, the words slicing more than he realized. Kara chimed in, "You should be grateful you even came. Some people can't afford vacations like this." Her voice was sugar-coated but sharp, meant to humiliate. I turned away and fixed my eyes on the endless ocean, silently vowing I'd never pay for my own erasure again. The smallest things cut the deepest. At breakfast, Mark asked Jenna for the card to pay the cafe bill. She handed over my credit card, the one I had left on the counter in the rush to leave that morning. I watched as he signed my name with a laugh, like it was a family joke we'd all agreed on. Later, while sitting on the deck, Linda announced that this vacation was about family unity. She said it while nudging my chair slightly out of the frame for another group photo. Someone laughed again. I didn't bother to ask who. I just looked out at the sea and thought how easily people rewrite history when someone else is footing the bill. That night, the air was thick with humidity and tension. I excused myself early, claiming I was tired, and went upstairs to the small attic bedroom. I opened my laptop and scrolled through my bank app. Every charge was there, restaurant tabs, gas, groceries, tours, all mine. I took screenshots of everything and saved them in a new folder titled Cape Receipts. I wasn't sure why yet, but something in my gut told me I'd need them. Later, I came downstairs for water and heard voices from the deck. I froze just before stepping outside. The conversation drifted in through the screen door.
"She's so uptight," Kara was saying.
"Who brings spreadsheets on vacation?" Jenna laughed. "Please, she's not even fun. Everything's a checklist." Linda sighed dramatically. She means well, but she always wants control. We have to let her feel useful, or she'll fall apart. Mark's voice came last, quieter but colder. Honestly, I just think she likes paying. It makes her feel needed. I didn't move. I just listened, my hand gripping the doorframe. The words weren't knives, they were confirmation. The kind that settles deep and stops the bleeding because you finally understand why it hurt in the first place. That was when I began recording. Quietly. I placed my phone on the deck table when no one was looking and pressed record. I didn't want revenge then. I wanted clarity. I wanted to know if the story I was being told, the one where I was invisible, difficult, ungrateful, was real or just convenient fiction. The next day, I listened to the recording while they were out on a beach walk. It was worse than I expected. They mocked my clothes, my serious face, even my habit of double-checking reservations. Jenna's laugh filled the background like a bell. Linda said I didn't understand family dynamics. Mark said I should be grateful anyone invited me at all. I paused the playback halfway through, my heart thudding. Proof. That was all I needed. That afternoon, Ethan decided to film another family video. Let's do something fun, he said, waving his camera. Everyone, line up by the water. I hesitated, standing off to the side. Jenna whispered something to Linda, who smiled and nodded. Actually, Linda called out, let's just do siblings for this one. It'll look better. The way she said better stung. I stepped back, pretending to fix my sunglasses. The camera rolled, capturing their perfect little tableau without me in it. It wasn't even cruel anymore. It was calculated. That night, during dinner, I noticed how easily they performed together. Laughter, stories, gestures, all in sync. Every so often, Linda would pat Jenna's hand, or Mark would refill her glass. To anyone watching, she was the daughter they adored. I was just a shadow at the edge of the table. When the check came, no one even glanced at me. The server placed it directly in front of me like it was prearranged. I smiled, signed, and tucked the copy into my purse beside the growing pile of receipts. Back in the attic room, I sat by the window and watched the lights of nearby cottages flicker along the shoreline. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, calm but alert. I thought about all the times I had mistaken tolerance for love, silence for peace. Maybe the lesson wasn't about how they treated me, but about what I had allowed. Before bed, I recorded a message on my phone. You are not crazy, I whispered to myself. You are not too much. You are just done pretending this is normal. Then I backed up the voice memo, just like the others. As the waves crashed outside, I felt a strange kind of peace. Not the soft kind that comes from forgiveness, but the sharp kind that comes from knowing the truth. I didn't know what I would do yet, but I knew something inside me had shifted. I had stopped hoping they would see me and started planning how to see myself again. I lay down and listened to the hum of the mini fridge, the faint seagull cries in the distance, and the sound of my own steady breathing. In that small attic room, surrounded by walls that slanted inward, I felt something expand inside me. It wasn't anger anymore. It was awakening. By Wednesday, the air inside the house had turned heavy, thick with politeness that was starting to crack. The laughter came too fast, the smiles too sharp. Everyone was performing, pretending that nothing was wrong, that we were just another family enjoying Cape Cod. But beneath it all, I could feel their unease. My silence had started to make them nervous. That morning, I stood on the deck sipping coffee, watching the fog lift off the water. Jenna came out in a wide-brimmed hat, humming, and didn't even look at me as she said, "We're leaving at 5 for dinner, okay?" I made the reservation. I smiled faintly. "Oh, where?" "Provincetown," she said. "Harbor View Restaurant. Dress nice. Mom wants pictures."
Of course she did.
Pictures. Evidence of happiness, carefully framed and cropped to erase discomfort. I nodded and went back inside. On the counter was a small stack of mail I'd brought from home, credit card statements and receipts. I picked one up, the total from the chef's night, $987.64.
Paid by me.
Every number was a quiet reminder of what I had built, what they were consuming without thanks. I decided to drive separately that evening. When I announced it, Mark raised an eyebrow.
Why?
We have room. I like my own space, I said simply. He shrugged and turned back to his drink. It wasn't a lie, I did like space. Especially the kind I could finally breathe in. The drive to Provincetown took about an hour. The air was golden with sunset, the road lined with dunes and beach grass swaying in the wind. I arrived first and paid for an extra hour at the parking meter. As I walked along the boardwalk, I saw them in the distance, posing for photos again, laughing, capturing another perfect frame. I noticed the caption on Jenna's phone when she tilted it for the selfie. Family time on the Cape? Our dream trip. My heart thudded once, hard. Our dream trip. Funny how easily words erase truth. When I joined them, no one acknowledged my arrival. The hostess led us to a long table near the window, overlooking the harbor lights flickering across the water. The view was breathtaking. The company was not. I sat at the end, near the railing, content to observe. Dinner began with loud chatter. Ethan ordered oysters for the table. Jenna snapped photos of every dish before anyone could touch it. Linda complimented her on coordinating everything so beautifully. Kara laughed, saying, "You're the reason this trip feels organized." I felt something inside me harden, slow and deliberate. They had rehearsed this. They had rewritten the script. I was no longer the planner or the provider. I was the background extra. Halfway through the meal, I excused myself to the restroom. When I returned, my chair was occupied by Jenna's handbag. I stood there for a moment, silent, until she noticed me.
Oh.
"Sorry," she said, not moving. There wasn't enough space for my purse. I picked it up gently and set it on the floor. Now there is. As I sat, I caught Linda telling the server to split the bill on 2 cards. I looked up. Both of the cards she named were mine. My pulse slowed to a calm rhythm. I had expected this. They didn't know that I was done playing their game. I waited until the laughter swelled, until the table was loud enough that the next moment would land like thunder. Then, quietly, I placed my phone in the center of the table. "Before we eat," I said, "I want to play something." The noise faded. Forks stilled. Jenna blinked. "What's this about?" "Just listen." The first recording began, the one from Sunday night on the deck. Linda's voice, smooth as ever, drifted through the speaker. "She's never the main character," she said. "Always wants attention, but doesn't know how to be likable." Kara's laugh followed. "She doesn't even have real friends." Mark's tone was dismissive. "She should be grateful we even let her come." Jenna's voice came last, bright and cruel. "She has the personality of a spreadsheet." The sound of waves in the background gave it a strange serenity. Then silence. The kind that tastes metallic. Ethan's fork clattered against his plate. The server, mid-step, froze with the bread basket in her hands. I pressed play again. The second clip, recorded near the lighthouse. Ethan called me an anchor. Linda said I should learn to pay without talking about it. More laughter followed. Then the third clip, just 8 seconds. Jenna whispers to Mark, "Use her card. She won't notice." No one breathed. The harbor bells outside were the only sound in the world. I looked around the table. Their faces shifted through panic, shame, and disbelief, cycling faster than I could count. I didn't flinch. "This is my final dinner on my tab," I said evenly. "After tonight, you will manage your own vacation." Linda opened her mouth, ready to lecture, then closed it. Mark attempted a weak smile. "Come on, it was just—" "No," I said. "It wasn't." Jenna tugged her sleeve, eyes darting everywhere but mine. Kara muttered that I was overreacting. I ignored them all and turned to the server, who stood there uncertainly. "I'll be paying for my meal only," I said, sliding my card forward. "1 entree and 1 tea, please." The server nodded slowly, understanding more than I said. When she returned with the receipt, I signed it neatly and placed my pen beside the still phone. I didn't bother to take the recordings back. I wanted them to see their reflections in the black screen, faces caught in the act of cruelty. When I stood to leave, no one stopped me. Their silence followed me out like a shadow. As I walked toward the door, I caught a glimpse of the harbor again. Lights flickering on the dark water, calm and endless. Outside, the wind was cool and steady. I breathed it in, the first clean breath I'd taken in days. Behind me, I heard Linda's voice faintly through the restaurant window, already rewriting the story. Let her. The truth didn't need defending anymore. I crossed the boardwalk, shoes clicking softly against the wood. Somewhere out there, the tide was turning. And for the first time, it was turning in my favor. That night, the house on Cape Cod was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic crash of waves beyond the dunes. I sat at the kitchen island, the one I had paid for, my laptop open and the blue light flickering across my face. The others were asleep or pretending to be. I didn't care which. The night belonged to me now. The first thing I did was open my banking app. The balance stared back at me, a number that carried every unspoken insult, every erased photo, every dinner I'd funded without acknowledgement. I scrolled to the authorized users section and began removing names one by one.
Mark.
Linda. Jenna.
Kara.
Each deletion clicked like a small lock turning in place. When the list was empty, I took a deep breath. I hadn't realized how heavy those invisible tethers had become. Then I closed the shared family credit card, the one I'd opened years ago, to make things easier. Easier for them, mostly. For me, it had been a monthly reminder of how much I gave and how little I mattered. I also canceled the second boat tour, the one scheduled for the next morning. Let them figure out their own adventure now. I sent an email to the property manager, forwarding the rental agreement with updated details, all damage charges to be billed individually. Clarity, not chaos. That was my new rule. Before closing my laptop, I created a folder on my desktop titled Cape. Inside it, I placed every receipt, invoice, and proof of payment. Then I added a one-page note. 3 facts. I paid for the house. I paid for the meals. I paid for the tours. 1 conclusion. I am done. After that, I walked upstairs to the attic bedroom, the one with the twin beds and slanted ceiling. My suitcase was already half-packed, as if I had known this moment would come. I folded my last few clothes, zipped the bag, and slipped on my sneakers. The moonlight spilled through the window, silver and calm. I paused for a long moment, looking around the small room that had quietly become my refuge. I wasn't leaving defeated. I was lying awake. Before heading out, I printed 1 sheet of paper and taped a copy to each bedroom door. In plain, bold letters it read, "The Wi-Fi password has been changed. For access, please contact the account holder directly." Underneath, I signed only my first name. Downstairs, I unplugged my phone from the charger and checked the time, 4:52 a.m. The horizon outside was beginning to pale, that fragile moment before dawn when the world resets itself. I loaded my suitcase into the SUV, started the engine, and drove away without looking back at the blue-shingled house. The drive to Boston was quiet and endless. I rolled down the window and let the cold morning air fill the car. It smelled of sea salt and pine, like freedom itself. By the time the sun rose fully, I was crossing the bridge off Cape Cod, watching the last shimmer of water disappear in the rearview mirror. At the rental counter, I turned in the SUV keys and caught the first flight to Chicago. No one knew yet. The cards were still working when I boarded, but by the time the plane touched down, they wouldn't be. I opened my phone mid-flight and transferred $12,000, the exact amount I'd spent on the trip, into my emergency fund. Then I renamed the account. It used to be Family Extras. I called it Peace. By the time I landed, my phone was vibrating nonstop. The family group chat was a storm: texts, missed calls, voice messages. Where are you? The cards aren't working. What happened to the tour? You can't just leave us stranded. The tone shifted quickly from confusion to outrage to pleading. I muted the conversation and set the phone face down on the tray table. I ordered tea and watched the sky outside the window turn from pale pink to gold. The warmth on my face felt like a new beginning. When I arrived at my apartment in Chicago, the city was draped in light rain. I set down my suitcase and just stood there breathing. The air smelled like wet concrete and jasmine from the planter outside my window. My home wasn't large, but it was mine, every lamp, every mug, every framed photo chosen by me. I hung my coat, watered the plant on the sill, and then opened the small corkboard above my desk. There, pinned between receipts and postcards, was a note I'd written to myself nearly a year ago. Pay attention to who claps for you. I smiled faintly and pinned it higher, right above the deed to my apartment and the budget sheet I updated each month. The sound of rain against the glass felt like applause from the universe itself. Later that afternoon, I composed one final email. I attached every receipt, every payment confirmation, and the audio files from those nights on the deck. The subject line read, "Vacation summary, final update." The message was brief. Attached are the records for the expenses I covered. I won't be asking for repayment, only acknowledgement of the truth. The fantasy has been funded, and it's over. Take care of yourselves. I'll be taking care of myself. I hit send and closed my laptop. The message wasn't for closure, it was for clarity. That evening, I made dinner for one: grilled salmon, steamed vegetables, and a glass of white wine. As I ate, the city lights began to bloom outside my window. I turned on some music, soft jazz, the kind that doesn't demand anything from you, and let the peace sink in. I had imagined my breaking point as something loud, cinematic, a door slammed, a dramatic speech, maybe even tears. But the real ending was quieter, sharper, more dignified. It didn't come with fury. It came with relief. Before going to bed, I journaled one last note. If I have to disappear to be loved, I'll choose to be seen, even if I stand alone. I looked around my apartment, my real, unshared space, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not pride, not anger, just serenity. Outside, thunder rolled gently in the distance. I stood by the window, watching the reflection of city lights ripple across the wet streets. Somewhere across the country, my family was probably arguing, blaming, rewriting. Let them. I had finally learned that peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from no longer needing to explain. And that night, for the first time in a long time, I slept without my phone beside me, without guilt, without noise, just the hum of the rain and the steady rhythm of my own heart reminding me that freedom was not loud. It was quiet, and it was mine.